Bob Zoellick and Mike Froman, both were U.S. trade representatives. Bob Zoellick for President George Bush, Mike Froman for President Obama. And they both worked on these huge deals.
They're the Detrius of GATT in Uruguay and the rest of it, right?
And the deals on which they worked spanned years, thousands of pages long. I got them together in a room, and they really are, you can sense, old friends. They're people on whom each other relied for advice and wisdom as they approached this job. But we talked about the moment we're in because fundamentally, the thing that they built, this global trading system, is what President Trump is trying to tear down. And you know, there was no animus about that that was evident in this conversation. But we talked about the objectives of President Trump's trade war, why he's imposing all of these tariffs. And it was just fascinating to hear them, what they've observed about the trade war thus far, where they think it's headed. You know, I started off by asking, have you been surprised by anything that's unfolded here? Both of them said, no. I mean, this was telegraphed by President Trump. He hates these multilateral giant trade deals. He wasn't making a secret of the fact that he wanted to dismantle them and destroy them. But just a fascinating conversation between these two individuals and myself. I mean, I felt kind of like a fly on the wall for some part of this, just about sort of what's been unfolding, what they think is going to happen next.
Some folks are looking at that Japan deal. That is a big trading partner. So this one we got to pay attention to. Some folks are saying that maybe President Trump let them off too easy simply because maybe he had that carve out for the autos. But isn't the auto sector where we have most of our trade deficit?
So much to unpeel here. And look, the Japanese made, I think, 8 trips to Washington over the course of these last 6 months to try to get one of these deals. And lo, they did. Look, I look at it and I think of a few things. The first is this very sizable commitment to investment that the Japanese have made. It reminds me of what we saw back during the first Trump term with China. They also made a promise to do sizable investment in U.S. companies. Of course, that didn't come to pass. So we'll see how all of that plays out. But you bring up the automakers. We have a 15% tariff now, according to this deal, on Japanese autos. That is less than the global tariff on cars. So you have the big 3 automakers in the U.S. essentially crying foul because, as they see it, Japan is getting preferential treatment here, and it kind of highlights the fact that there's ambiguity about the motivations here. Wasn't the point of this to improve manufacturing, domestic manufacturing here in the U.S.? How is this possibly going to do it?
I mean, Zoellick and Froman go back to the absolute trenches of, can we trust the Japanese? I look at the agreement, and it's not to editorialize it, it's naive, but the president has very clear unilateral deal-making, transactional-making opinions, and the Japanese seem completely removed from that. They're looking at a immensely long-term unit growth process to move more Toyotas to America, right?
That has been one of the main difficulties here, is the urgency of this White House and this president in juxtaposition with the way that countries, including Japan, have approached this process in the past.
Versus a dance that Zoellick and Froman lived.
Absolutely. And so we talked a bit about that, the motivations that President Trump has. So one is leverage. We've seen the president use tariffs as a way of getting folks to the table on other issues, dealing with fentanyl, dealing with these other wars. Revenue is another one, and something that Mike Froman said is, since these tariffs have been in place, they've raised $100 billion. So in the near term, it has been successful in that regard. Now, something that Bob Zoellick said to me is, all right, you have that in the near term, but if this really diminishes the U.S. economy, how's that going to play out long run? The other is deindustrialization, going back to what Paul brought, bringing back jobs, manufacturing here to the U.S., something that we were told a keystone of this whole process. Deals with automakers and all of that. How that plays out will be another thing entirely, but it's not been the focus of President Trump so far.
Have you seen anybody, Paul, from Detroit who's happy with the Japanese deal? I'm searching for the first person.
That's why we had Matt Miller in here
earlier.
Get one
more in here. I got an important thing. Get one more in here with Gura.
So President Trump is over at the Fed building today. Is this just some noise here to kind of another way for him to jab at Fed Chairman Powell?
So the Fed chairman has said to the inspector general at the Fed he welcomes an investigation into this renovation process that's been underway for a few years now. Of course, it is a sizable cost overrun. He's been frank about that. He's been frank about it in congressional testimony. And he invited the president's deputy chief of staff, director of the OMB, others to come take a tour of this facility. We look at the guidance that we got last night from the White House. They're on the schedule as President Trump going to the Federal Reserve today at 4 o'clock. This is a rare thing.
Yep.
Count on one hand how many times the president of the United States has gone over to the Fed, which isn't very far. It's a stone's throw away from the White House. But we'll see sort of what unfolds there. Of course, there has been so much heated rhetoric from the president.
Right.
I don't know what he's going to look at, what he's going to see. There's so much concern about the roof and the fountains and the elevators and all of that. But it just highlights the fact that this is now the line of attack that we're seeing from this White House on the Fed. And perhaps their only hope here to get any kind of grist from Congress when it comes to pushing back on the Fed and its chairman.
We don't